All right, good evening, everyone. My name's Sheila Pratt, and I'm on the board of New West, and I'm happy to be hosting this New West event, the launch of Danial Neil's latest novel, The Sum of One Man's Pleasure. Just so everyone knows, it's being recorded, so if you don't want to be recorded, turn off the camera or go bye-bye, I guess. And also, I'm supposed to remind you that this book, of course, is available hopefully at your local bookstore and also on the New West website. Let's acknowledge wherever you are tonight that we are on traditional territories of many First Nations and Métis and Inuit, and we express gratitude and respect for this and pledge to advance reconciliation. So Danial Neil, longtime BC author, this is his sixth novel. And although he'll tell you at some point that he wrote about 20 before, as he was getting started and before it got published. So here's a man who's earned his craft for sure. I love this novel with its historic content and context. He delves into a shadowy and rather shameful era of Canadian history, a witch hunt and purge against gays and communists in the civil service in the late 50s, early 60s. And that provides the catalyst for our hero Finn Kenny's journey from Ottawa to a lumber estate, an estate on Vancouver Island. It's a story about painful secrets that people have, the toll they take on people's lives, and how they resolve this and recover life. Finn Kenny was called down from his office in Ottawa, hauled out for interrogation, which I had no idea they did, and then found a place to hide away in the estate of the Spencer family. The arrogant Lady Spencer, who is the wife of Ted Spencer, the lumber baron, has an equally bitter and destructive personality, and the two of these are thrown together and to run the business, and they have to find some way to come to a reconciliation, I guess. The novel reveals the reasons for the bitterness in each person's heart and finds a way to redemption, though that road is not easy. And these are many plot twists that were just very interesting. I really enjoyed the way Danial Neil weaves the little known history into the story. The whole McCarthyism from the US coming north, which was sort of the catalyst for the purges in Canada. There's a whole other subplot with the couple, Bertie and Percival Bishop, who are sort of run the household on the Spencer estate. They're descendants of a group of Blacks who were invited from the US in the 1850s and settled in Salt Spring Island. So all that is another true element of history that Daniel explores. So I find that one of the most intriguing parts. There's a lot of other issues he explores: corruption at a lumber mill, race relations, that kind of thing. But there's, in reference to cultural context, Kennedy assassination, to remind us of this sort of period of history we're in. But ultimately, it's the story of these two people who have to find a way to tell their own stories to themselves as much as others, and in order to start their lives, come out of hiding and kind of start their lives. And it's a very interesting journey. So Daniel is going to read a passage, and then I thought we could get to some questions. How's that sound, Daniel?
That sounds good, Sheila. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is chapter 4. And what I've done in this novel is, in the first 7 chapters, the first probably half a page or a page, I go back to 1958 during the time when Finn Kenny was taken by the RCMP for interrogation. Then it goes to current time in 1963. So you'll see a bit of a delay. Ted Spencer, who rescued him from Ottawa to bring him to his estate, has died. And so this is the scene. We don't really know the bishops, the custodians, and Finn believe that Lady Spencer, she's going to fire them. and they'll no longer have jobs. There's quite a bit of worry there. So first I'll get to the part in Ottawa. I'd come to know that silence in some was not merely a mark of their reflected nature or even the result of a personal dilemma that rendered them withdrawn and uncommunicative. The two men, with their terrible silence, had a sinister quality. They drove and said nothing, as if I didn't matter, as if my fear was groundless, inconsequential, nothing at all. They drove along the Ottawa River, away from public view, past the idle machinery of failed industry, past old shops and abandoned cars where weeds sprouted up from the under flattened tires. They stopped under a bridge abutment, stopped in its shadow. The driver turned off the ignition. The dark skin of the river moved slowly. If it had nowhere to go, we just sat. After an hour, I realized that they were working on my nerves. My hand slowly crept up to the door handle. I had the impulse to jump out, to run. What had I done to be made to feel so criminal, so worthless? The door wouldn't open. In a way, it saved me because a part of me sought refuge in the cold murk of the river. Would they have cared if I had drowned? Say something, I said, the jarring trill of my own voice. What have I done? Shut up, Mr. Kenny, the one in the front of me said. I woke with a start. There was a loud knock on my cabin door. Someone seemed to be breaking it down or attempting to. It had to be the meat-fisted bishop. I got out of my bed and looked out the window. It was raining and the snow was all but gone. The doubtful world looked tilted, fuzzy, and yet I was certain of the look on his face. He was as grave as a man could be. It wasn't good news. I had taken on the habit of locking my door, something that arrived with me at Spencerwood. I went to the door and let him in. The girls have returned to university, he said, and we've been called to a meeting with Lady Spencer. This seems to be the day, my friend, when we will learn our fate. This is a hell of a time for a meeting, Bishop. I'm not feeling very well. Surely not this morning. Past noon, he said, and I'm afraid, Finn, your excuse will only inflame her already aggrieved mood. We have to face this. It's not the end of the world. You don't think so? No. Don't give up so easily, Bishop. We can negotiate. And what is your leverage? We serve the estate. That's our leverage. That's what we do. That's what we continue to do. Don't quit on me, Bishop. Quit on you? I saw the hurt in him, his subtle withdrawal. I felt worse just then. Sorry, I said. You would never quit on me, Bishop. It's all you have, he said. Yes. Bishop looked around my cramped cabin, my every possession in sad orderliness, the typewriter on the table, the only thing of value. It seemed to pull his mouth down, my trivial life. Get dressed, he said. Bertie's got coffee on in the kitchen. Then he looked out the window. Take your truck if it will start. Not without a battery, I'm afraid. Well, he shook his head. I've been planning to get a new one sent over from the garage in town, but you've been busy, I know. She's a vile woman, Bishop. Don't let it turn to hate, Finn. I'm warning you. The day that happens, it will turn against you. You'll become what you despise. You don't hate anything, do you, Bishop? He let out a long, restless breath. She lost a baby, he said soberly. They called it crib death. That was a long time ago. Then he turned and went out the door. That was the first time I'd heard about it. I suppose it was too sad to talk about. Some things are best left alone. I couldn't say that it changed how I felt about her. It made me feel worse in a way, as if we existed at the opposite ends of bitterness. Bishop wanted me to know, perhaps to steer me away from my fears. And it didn't change my circumstance. She was still a difficult woman with her fistful of resentments waving in my face. Oh, I wasn't cold-hearted. At least I hoped I wasn't. Bishop, on the other hand, was a pragmatic man, and I suppose he was close enough to retirement that he wasn't as bothered about his future as much as I was. And there was more. Things I would have to face, the world beyond the iron gates of Spencerwood. So I did the only thing that I could. I cleaned myself up, put on my best sweater, a smart argyle in mauve and gray, put on a shine in my shoes. I would find my way in the most hospitable, the most pleasing and affable manner. I would grace her with my clear sobriety and above all, a dependable and faithful temperament. However distasteful it was to imagine my fawning desperation, I decided that I would do it to save my job. I trudged across the soggy lawn and mud sprayed up from the sods. I should have stuck to the road, but I wouldn't. I wanted to get it over with, whatever the day would bring. I couldn't take much more, fretting over my future. And there I was, dressed so nicely with my shins awash with muck, my shoes as if unearthed by Bishop's make-believe dog. I felt all at once the full misery of failure, the return of the collapse that had once nearly killed me. The sky was unkind, the grounds without mercy. And then at the back door of the manor, Bishop stood shaking his head. How I'd let him down. Finn, for the life of me, I don't understand you, he said. You could have taken your truck. If you had the damn thing fixed, stay right there, I'll get you a towel. He regarded me rather pathetically. I waited for him, discomposed. He returned with a towel and wiped away the mud and cleaned my shoes. And when I went in, I realized why he met me at the door. Lady Spencer was standing in the kitchen. She had one hand on her hip and a cigarette in the other. She wore a navy blue suit, the kind modern businesswoman might wear. She looked confident, prepared, and displayed nothing of a widow's dark plumage. And when we didn't seem to share the same effects from drinking, well, I was disadvantaged in the worst way. Sit, she said. She motioned with her head to the nook where Bertie sat and where coffee had been poured for me. I sat down and Bishop joined us. He had a folded newspaper in his hand and he set it down on the table in front of him. I added cream to my cup of coffee and stirred, and the clanking like tiny assaults to my brain. She was still standing, and it seemed she would address us on her feet. I sipped my coffee and lit a cigarette. I needed such comforts. An executioner gets such last requests. There was no mistaking her posture, the way she stood before us. She had all the power. We had nothing. We sat silently, waiting for her to speak. The lull was uncomfortable, as if waiting a verdict. I turned to her slightly and recognized with some certainty a smirk on her lips. How she seemed to exploit the silence, seemed to enjoy the tension that it created. She leaned against the counter now, watching us. I thought I heard Bertie moan as if it was the leaking of her will. Then Lady Spencer stood away from the counter. You are all so quiet, she said. We said nothing and looked to our folded hands on the table for solace. Well, I'll just say it, she went on. Spencerwood is not the same anymore. How could it be, really? Teddy is gone. Everything has changed. You can all see that. It is all so big and empty now with Philippa and Tiffany away at university, much too big for one person. Oh, I don't love it. I do love it dearly. I surely do. My studio is just divine. Teddy built it, all for me, you know. She paused and looked around the kitchen, then behind her to the hallway. Something seemed to distract her, perhaps a memory or even real emotion. I thought of the child she had lost. I don't know why, but I did. And then I wondered if we had been relieved of our duties. I wasn't sure. We turned to one another in some doubt. Then it seemed that Bishop required clarification. He leaned back from the table, straightened himself, and lifted his big hands, palm up like a faith healer. Are you sure that Mr. Spencer would agree? He asked thoughtfully. Agree with what, Mr. Bishop? It seems to me that you are no longer certain of our place at Spencerwood. Are we finished? Did I say that, Mr. Bishop? Not in so many words. And Mr. Bishop, Mr. Spencer hasn't much to say in the matter now, does he? I suppose not, Lady Spencer. What an odd thing to say, Mr. Bishop. Well, then, I do believe you should give proper notice to your employees. Do you wish to leave, Mr. Bishop? I won't stop you. And if that is the case, then you would need to give me notice. I must say this is quite a shock, Lady Spencer. Is it now, Mr. Bishop? Do I need to remind you that I have lost my husband? No, of course not. Then Bertie spoke up. You see, Lady Spencer, she said, we have nowhere else to go. We have been here nearly 20 years. We think of it as our home. I fail to see why I should be responsible for your home. Don't you have family somewhere? Yes, we have a daughter on Campbell River. You know her, Lady Spencer Isabel. She looked after your young girls. They were, yes, yes, she swiped at the air dismissively. They were good friends. What is all this carrying on? Lady Spencer, please. Now, Bertie, Bishop interjected. He patted her hand. One would think that you would be grateful for Spencerwood, Lady Spencer said. God knows your people were a poor lot. You came to a strange country. I suppose for your freedom, well, you have had a fine time here, haven't you? She reached for an ashtray on the counter and knocked the ash off her cigarette. It was all quite unsettling. The tenor of the conversation seemed to be deteriorating further, if that was even possible. Her change of heart seemed unattainable now. There were no grounds for negotiations. There never were, really. And then I heard what seemed like a deep rumble, as if from the belly of a just world. I turned to Bishop. Lady Spencer had touched the nerve of a good man, and it seemed he was about to address it. I have been in your service for a long while, Lady Spencer, Bishop said, and I still believe that you do not know me. You don't seem to know much about my family. I want you to understand. Percival, not now, Bertie said. She knew where he was about to go. No, Bishop said, raising his hand. This must be said. Then speak up, Mr. Bishop, Lady Spencer said impatiently. Tell me who you are. Very well, Lady Spencer, Bishop said. I watched him. There was something terribly personal now. I couldn't say that I knew what it might be. I had an idea, perhaps an assumption. He never talked about it in any detail, his past, his view of the world. I never thought it my place to ask. And because I never shared my past, my own history with him, I respected his privacy. And then Bishop drew a deep breath, and when he exhaled, out it came. This is still a new country, Lady Spencer, he began eloquently, but the Coast Salish people lived here long before Captain Cook sailed the coastal waters of British Columbia. And as time went on, it wasn't long before people began to come to this land. The gold rush of 1858 on the Fraser River offered promise of prosperity, and my people. That's enough, Mr. Bishop, Lady Spencer said. I get your point, but it's not my history now, is it? Whose history is it then? Bishop asked her. What do you think that I need to care? She answered coolly. Perhaps you are better off with your own. Bishop didn't let her finish. He lifted from his seat. It was certain that common decency had made no impression on her, could not sway her. Segregation is only in your mind, Bishop said bitterly. It is all of our history. That's all I want in my life, to see the day when society no longer divides the world by the color of a man's skin, as if there is another world for him in which to live. Please, Mr. Bishop, you're boring me with your melodrama. Now I need to get on with my day. There's the important matter of Spencer Industries. It seems I will soon have more than enough on my plate. Can't you just be thankful? Thankful. Gratitude, Mr. Bishop. Just then I recognized that something was amiss. The subject of the conversation was divergent, moved in opposite directions. Poor Bishop was beyond consoling. But had we been given our notice? I wasn't so sure anymore. And then Bishop picked up his newspaper all at once. He opened it and slapped the page with the back of his hand and held it up to her. The headline, Martin Luther King wiretapped. I'll stop there.
Pretty dramatic moment when they're trying to find their future. Now that Ted Spencer's gone. Yeah, no, it's leave him hanging, I say.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, it does bring up this role that the bishops play as kind of a moral compass or conscience. And how did you come to put that character that way? I mean, there's other wonderful moments where Bishop takes him fishing, and I love your fishing day. Two men out in the river. It's a very beautiful, well-written passage. So how did you find that history? How did you come up to make them the sort of moral compass of the book, and talk about that?
A lot of things with my writing come organically, and I don't really work with an outline. I work with what happens next kind of sense. I feel my way through it. But once I had the estate, I knew that we're going to have caretakers. And not to be stigmatizing a certain population, nevertheless, I I looked into the history of Black history, and I was astounded to find that how deep and how wonderful it was, and it was difficult for them at the same time. I mean, you imagine they come from Minnesota in 1858 all the way to Victoria, then ending up in Salt Spring Island. But the Bishop's family, that's what I chose. And Finn Kenny, in order to work through his trials and tribulations, he needed a voice of reason. And I gave that to Bishop. I mean, we really, if we don't have a voice of reason, we'll continue making the same mistakes over and over. And so it's with Dear Bishop, this grounded man, where Finn Kenny gets to, and Bishop's not perfect either. He's not perfect, but he is, he's a wonderful character. I really kind of fell in love with that whole scene in the kitchen. I mean, I'd like to go back to it and have coffee with him.
Yeah, well, wouldn't we all? He's got a lot of wisdom, that man. There's another quote in there when, and the contrast between him and Finn, I also think is so interesting, because it just shows how Finn is so crumpled up by his past that he's unable to escape. And at one point, Bishop has some words, you deserve a good life. Don't let that keep you, don't let all that keep you a prisoner. Don't make your past life a life sentence. And it's just so to the point of what Finn needs to do, but he takes a very long time getting there.
Takes a long time.
Yeah, and partly because he wants to fight with Lady Spencer at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. I guess one other quick question just about the history of this. How did you get onto this whole purge thing? I hadn't heard of that. I'd never heard of this fruit machine. It was really interesting.
Well, it was, in 2003, I was working on a novel, The Life and Times of Orville Buck. And anyway, it was about the first RCMP, Northwest Police in Canada. John A. MacDonald was looking for a police. So I was going to do this novel. So I started looking at RCMP, and all of a sudden something about a shadow, and a shadow of the RCMP. Looked it up, and Fruit Machine came up, and I read the story. And so I never wrote it. I always wanted to do a short story. I didn't know how to approach it. So in 2018, Sarah Fody she wrote and directed a film called The Fruit Machine. It's an outstanding film. And that inspired me I have to write about this. It's not well known in Canadian history. And I wanted, in my writing, I like to go back in time to history to see how far we've come. And this is a good example. It doesn't look like we've come far at all sometimes, but at this era, it was so brutal and so oppressive that I wanted to write a novel about it. So that's the foundational story in Ottawa in 1858 that gives Finn Kenny, that tells you so much about him. He's running, he's afraid, he's hiding, he's been traumatized. So, that's how I arrived at that.
I think it's really great how the hiding and the fear are such themes in his life, and it affects so many parts of him. He can't share much with Bishop. He certainly can't share with Lady Spencer, or with Ted, I suppose. And he keeps his life secret in this secret manuscript that he's writing, which eventually sort of comes to light. But that fear is such a big factor. In Lady Spencer too, I guess, eh?
Yes.
Yeah. So what? So where do you think Lady Spencer? She has a complicated story, and it really comes out in that passage you read, that just how arrogant and narcissistic she kind of is. So her transformation is more complicated. How did you figure how to do that? Without giving too much away.
Without giving too much away, yes. When you get to write fiction, of course, you can have your character do incredible things, but you always want to stick to a relative truth to that person. And I gave her, she had trauma. I wasn't really sure what it was. I mean, these things kind of happen as I write a novel, and I trust that they will come what I need to know. And for her, I gave her a personality that was protecting something within her. It was her exterior shell. It was flimsy. as we all know. But it was hard. It was harsh. She was protecting more. The more wicked she gets, we get a sense of the more she's protecting, and the profundity of what she is protecting comes out in her personality. So as the story develops, we get to experience that over and over. And of course, there will be an arc with that also.
Yes, yeah, we shouldn't reveal much of that because it's a very interesting part of the story where
Yes.
what she's hiding, what she's running from.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, it's quite interesting, and I think it's a little ambiguous even by the end how close they get, but they resolve enough within each other to make something work here.
Yes.
Yeah. So one thing that I wondered about is just in the title, "The Sum of One Man's Pleasure." This is such a complicated book, and I noticed that in the novel, "The Sum of One Man's Pleasure," I think it comes up here in the when he recalls the fishing day on the river, and the solitude, the silence, the presence of wild things. Men in history have sought that too, a place to revive the tired heart, etc. To me, it seemed the sum of one man's pleasure. But this novel's so much more difficult. I'm curious about that title.
Okay. When you're not feeling well, when you're down and you're lost and you're injured or you're traumatized, maybe it's stress or anxiety, what you have left is simple things, simplicity. They always say stop and smell the roses, but in essence, that's what Finn's world was. It was the wind in the trees, or the softly falling snow, or sitting by the fireplace, the warmth, or a cup of coffee, a cigarette, the sipping of his liquor, the sound of raindrops on the roof. I mean, the smell of the dank woods. Those are all simple pleasures, and the sum of them is all those things. And I can go on. I mean, we all have simple pleasures, like a freshly struck match, or those, or a petrichor, the smell after the rain. Life is full of simple pleasures, and usually we wake up to them in trauma. We appreciate those things right under our feet. So this is what Finn is doing, and throughout the novel, in the narrative, you will see those little pleasures that he talks about. He's the narrator, so all those things are some of one man's pleasure, and it also can be interpreted to other things. I got that from Roger K. Brown. I mean, I have a lot of his books. He's a fisherman. He was a Campbell River magistrate and a great environmentalist, wrote many, many books in the 40s and 50s. And one of his books, Fisherman's Winter, he talked about the pleasure of being in heavy water, the pleasure of companionship, the pleasure of sharing a drink after fishing, the pleasure of being out, to be kind of cradled by the woods or the wilderness. That pleasure, I started thinking about that, and we might think of pleasure in a more erotic way, but there's the pleasure of these simple things. That's what Finn's life has become, just the simple things.
Right, that's true. Yes, and even for Bishop, there's a lot of that. He has more pleasure, more a broader life, of course. But yeah, those especially in the natural world are very big, and that's kind of BC too, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can't help but ask, of course, having looked back on this history, and it raises a couple of questions. What lessons do we get from this? On the other hand, when I was reading this, I thought, oh my God, our own world is as messed up as it was back in the early 60s, when it was full of racism and Cold War and race riots and assassinations, etc. And now our world today is like equally upside down, turned in turmoil in some ways. So I'm not sure you were necessarily looking for lessons, but did you find them? But do you think we are ahead? Have we ever changed? Is it?
Well, it's difficult to think, and like I mentioned before, that sometimes we need to look at history to see how far we've come, and we still social unrest. We still have that, I talk about the assassination of JFK, I talk about the Cold War and threats of communism. Well, those are huge things. I think it's just different now, but we have more. Back then, you had a TV in front of you and a newspaper, and that was your source of your media information. There's not much beyond that. Now we have, the breadth of the world's problems just on a feed. So I don't know if it's changed that much. I don't know. I think we're more compassionate people. I think we're more inclusive now. Those are the big things. But in this novel, I wanted to explore how far we've come with our treatment of LGBTQ people and, the gay men that were persecuted. How far have we come? We have come. We have come. Haven't come all the way of total acceptance, which should be automatic. I mean, it just makes no sense to me. But compared to 1958, we have come a fair distance, and a lot of people suffered in that time, and they're still suffering. But change comes slowly, and we have to stick with it.
I agree. There's certain things that are definitely have moved ahead. One thing I really thought was interesting. I mean, there's the Diefenbaker Pearson are mentioned in this, and we think of those guys, Pearson, each as a great prime minister, their own characters and accomplishments, but it was under their prime ministerships that this thing happened, and it's not talked about very much in Canadian history.
No.
And these guys should have, their legacies are partly that, and so I'm really glad it's getting a good examination here. Yeah.
Yes.
So I should also remind anybody in the audience, if you have some questions, feel free to put it in the chat. I probably should have said that.
Yeah.
And feel free to. Well, we can get to them as soon as they're there. And I guess one other thing I wanted to talk about, which is the town of Fawn Hill that you created, and again, kind of a 50s town, of course, not very charitable when it came down to Finn's fate and what they thought, and a certain amount of groupthink going on there. But you didn't make the mayor very benevolent either. I mean, there are not too many good guys there. What did you think?
Well, when I was developing that, you got to look. I was looking at it realistic. How would the town react in 1963? And it would be just that way. There would be a few people on your side, but not many. And that, and Fawn Hill, it was fun to put together. It was like Margaret Lawrence's Manawanka, where you get to make up a town and fill it full of characters. And that's what I did. And of course, to build something interesting, you have to include everyone and give them a little bit in the story, maybe a conversation, maybe, because in order to describe a village, it's full of people. So I used the devices of a council meeting and different devices to include them. So we gave each one a little voice, and in its entirety builds into a town. Just the Charlie Sales in the gas station. I mean, and the guy at the lumber yard and the bakery, and so I did that, and I had a lot of fun with that. I mean, that is so rewarding, because at some point you want the readers to actually visualize Fawn Hill as it exists, like the railway was there when it was running. It doesn't run anymore. But yeah, that's how I did it. I had it was great fun.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was because you have a good range there. You've even got the Reverend in the Anglican Church, and there's this kind of dramatic scene in the church later in the story. Yeah. So I thought it was a really interesting way, because in the end, part of the message here is you can hide on the estate, but you can't from yourself and from everybody else. But eventually, you got to come out if you're going to have a life. So it wasn't easy coming out to that crowd, right? Listen to what you said.
it wasn't easy, and it took a lot of courage, and it took Bishop. Bishop encouraged him. He wouldn't let him off the hook.
Yes.
And so, you know, when you have support, you can't do hard things without support. I mean, it's miraculous if you can. But
Yes.
he had support, and I was kind of happy that how that I had no idea that was going to happen until I got to that chapter. It's like I had no
Oh,
idea.
really?
No, I never do. I don't have an outline. I just what happens next, what happens next, and that's how I write. And I trust it. All my novels are like that. I uh, just ask that question. It's almost like what should happen next, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which answers all the question of plausibility, plot development, tension, pace, character development, and arc. When you say what should happen next, that includes all that. So it just so happens what I choose manages all those things, luckily.
Yeah. I thought, and Bishop himself gets a surprise, but it's about this, but he remains steadfast. So that's kind of cool. I thought that was an important character to do.
Yes.
I thought if there's not any questions about the story itself, you might want to talk a little bit about your writing process. I mean, you've taken you took time to get your voice going in writing other novels and stuff. You
Good.
might enjoy talking a bit about that.
Yeah. So I used to write in high school and journal and stuff and write poetry, and then we had kids and had a wonderful time. In 1986, I was working, and I thought, well, I don't like this too much anymore. I think I want to be a writer. So I decided I'm going to be a writer. And my dad's story is he's born in Headley. It's a mining town. So I decided to do his story. And I sent that out. Then I wrote another story, and I wrote another story. I kept on writing. I had this dream that, of course, the first book I sent out, I thought I was going to get a call that weekend. I mean, you have to have confidence that is ridiculous because you don't really know how hard it is. Then you start doing the work, and I realized, yes, you have to do the work. So after wasn't until 2000 I started winning contests at Surrey International Writers Conference, like Poetry Prize and fiction, and I just never gave up. I just developed, and one fellow at the conference told me that Stephen King had once told him at a conference that you don't find your voice until the millionth word. And right about that time, you had all my novels up at that time, 15 or whatever. It's about a
Yeah.
million words. And I started at English 12. That was my benchmark. And I took courses, and I studied at UBC, but at the very beginning when I first started, I had a long way to go. I had a long hill to climb, but I'm a Capricorn, you plod along. I never give up. I have a high commitment level
Yeah.
because I had this one thing that I don't want to be 70 and having quit 10 years before, because you're going to be old regardless. You might as well be a writer. So I didn't want that regret of stopping, because it's guaranteed it won't happen. It will never happen if you quit. So I stuck with it.
Well, good for you. I mean, it's a lot of work, it takes a lot of commitment. So
Yeah.
but anyway, this is a really quite wonderful novel. So thank heavens you kept going at it then.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other last thing I thought is, the lumber baron is such a BC character.
Yeah.
It's and this guy, poor Ted, he dies off early in the story, but still he provides a structure and an escape for
Yeah.
for
Yes.
for our hero. So I'm sure you didn't have much trouble coming up with that character.
No. Interestingly enough, when I choose Vancouver Island, I chose that. Before I moved to Vancouver Island, when I didn't know I was coming here, I was writing novels about Vancouver Island.
Okay.
It's because it was more, well, I can't say really pristine because it's been logged quite extensively over the last century, but its primary industry. So when I chose that, I couldn't choose anything else because it just made so much sense. And so I busily studied the different sawmills up and down the valley, and there's one up by Courtney that I used. And so you delve into how you delve into the details of a topic in its relationship to how far it goes in a novel. So I don't generally over detail something that's only going to have a passing.
Right.
But some things I delve into the detail very much, like fishing. Well,
Right.
the fishing one was.
You must be a fisherman, right?
Yeah, someone said that once. Yes. Okay. So I experienced all that, and so I what I wanted to do in that. Am I going off topic, Sheila? So I'll continue.
Just slightly, not, but go ahead.
No, go ahead. So the river, the Cowichan River, I've been up there a few times. So I wanted to get out of the estate. Everything happens on the estate. So I didn't want the readers to be overstay in the estate from chapter to chapter, because I wanted to be precious. So I stepped out into a different scene, and two chapters or three, can't remember, in the Cowichan River. And the detail of that is my own experience. I know how it feels. I know how it looks. I know the smells. I know the textures. And I think I said in the back of the book, I wanted people to experience Finn Kenny's reverence as their own.
Right.
And, so I just love writing that scene. It also serves when the men are out and sometimes maybe get in deep water, have a drink, and they're sitting around the fire and they start asking these deep questions. And I wanted that to be the place, because it's a pivotal moment when Finn and Bishop sit around the fire after they've been fishing. So yeah, I just love that.
No, it was lovely, and it was a pivotal moment. And I love that whole episode. It was really well written, and just created a lovely mood. And you're right, the estate becomes a bit of a prison for Finn. So when he steps out of it, it was a very interesting place to go.
Yeah.
So I just have one last question. This is kind of unfair, but we should just for fun do this. Okay, who would play the main characters? Who would play Finn if you made a movie of this? And who would play, above all, Lady Spencer?
The first one, Finn Kenny, I want Ryan Gosling to play.
Oh, perfect.
And he's Canadian. And Lady Spencer, I want Rachel McAdams to play that.
Oh, yeah.
If you watched Midnight in Paris with Owen Wilson, she was so sarcastic and incredible. I just loved her in that movie. So that's what I would pick.
Excellent. Those are great choices. That would those two would work really well. Ryan Gosling would be. I could see him. Yeah, he's kind of the right.
He'd be a great Finn Kenny. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, he can do his tippling well and all of that. So
yeah.
So I don't know if there's any questions out there. If not, I'm happy to wrap things up. Are you? Is there anything more you wanted to say about it, Daniel? Or are you?
Let's see if I have anything in my notes. No, I think that's.
I'm sure you're working on the next book already. I think.
I'm working. Oh yeah, I'm always working on a novel. I have to have a novel going all the time, and I write one probably every 13 months. I have never had a gap more than a couple months between my novels since 1986. So just pedal to the metal. It's almost like that's what I do.
So it's probably bad luck to talk about the topic, but
of
the next one.
Oh, my next novel. Well, the one I have a novel with New S Press.
Yes, you do.
And
Yeah,
I was talking about, remember, I'd like to take topics that are interesting and not well known. And that
right.
novel's about veteran Canadians who volunteered to fight in the Vietnam War.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and what happened to them when they came back. That's their story. So that's called The Honor in Dying Young. I mentioned that to you before, I believe. Did I? Maybe not.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the one I'm doing now is called Song of the Sea Wolf. I wanted to create a novel about the endangered wolves that live only on Vancouver Island. There's wolves that are um, that live on the East Coast, and they're a little smaller than the mainland wolves, but they're incredible, and they're not protected. They're endangered, but they're not protected. So I wanted to incorporate a novel with Seawolf in it. And it's not about a sea wolf, but I incorporate uh, I guess their uh, problems we're having with wolves and people feeding them and whatnot, and how that's affecting them. So what I want to do, it's about a novel. It starts in Saskatchewan or Alberta rather, and Saskatchewan, Alberta goes to Tofino, and so that's what I'm working on right now. I'm almost finished.
Wow, that's great. Well, carry on, Daniel.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time tonight, and thank everybody for listening. And don't forget to buy the book. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a
Okay.
real pleasure. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
All right. Thanks, Sheila, so
Okay.
much. Thank you, everybody.
Yep. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.